Chancellor, if we could, last year we spoke, you were fairly new here, and we spoke about the system redesign. So if you could just walk us through that process of where we are in that journey and also the appropriation that you desire to go along with it and how that will help.
No, it's great. Thank you. Thank you, and happy birthday, Chair. I remember my 37th. The system redesign really focuses on two things simultaneously. The first really is the financial stabilization of the system and its universities, and that's absolutely critical. The second really focuses on transforming the system of universities so that it continues to serve the people of the state by providing an affordable, quality, career-relevant education in the way that our communities and our employers need. Critical to both of those objectives, financial stabilization and transforming our universities in service to the state, is our ability to leverage our operating scale, to stop doing things 14 times over, to enable students wherever they're located across our system to have access to the educational programming that's available elsewhere, to continue to ensure that our programs address the needs of employers and communities and are thus relevant to our students. So the system redesign is really looking at how we use our operating scale in that way. It has a number of component parts, all of which are marching forward. One is to reduce cost through adopting a range of shared services. Another is to put in place an infrastructure which allows our universities to do shared academic programming, to allow students at any one university to have access to the programs at others. And there are a variety of other aspects. The appropriations request does three things. It seeks a 2% increase in our operating budget. That's basically our cost to carry and allows us to continue our commitment to student affordability. It asks for a $20 million one-time investment in that infrastructure, which will enable us to transform ourselves and to leverage our operating scale. As described, that is seen as the first installment on a $100 million 5-year ask. And then there are three pieces of legislation which are making their way through the House, thanks to members of this committee and the Education Committee, which provide the board with some of the enabling powers that it needs in order to be more responsive in the time ahead. The only other thing I'd say is that when I appeared before this body last time, I promised to do 5 things in relation to the kinds of issues and concerns that were being expressed to me by many of the members of this committee and also many of the members of the General Assembly. To be accountable for how we expend public and non-public dollars, to be transparent in everything we do, to address student affordability by not continuing to raise tuition, by aligning our costs with our revenues, and by getting our arms around the challenges faced by our lower enrolled schools. Over the last year, we have made tractable progress in each of those areas. There is, I'll admit, a great deal more to do, but we are well on our way in achieving the objectives of this system redesign, and I expect to continue to deliver on the promises next year that I make for the current.
What are some of the things that you cannot do now that if this package of bills, if the redesign legislation goes through, you will be able to do? Can you give us a couple specific examples, especially in terms of the cost efficiencies and saving measures?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things we're unable to do now would be to change the structure of the corporate entity. Only the General Assembly has the power to change our corporate structure. So that if we wanted to, for example, set up a new school to operate a school of nursing on a statewide level because it made more sense, because it introduced greater efficiencies, we would be unable to do that without introducing, asking you to introduce legislation to enable us to do that. If that school of nursing did not succeed, we would be unable to go back to the way we're operating currently. So there's an example of one aspect, a critical aspect. A second aspect is that we are regulated in our use of our dollars as if all of our dollars were public dollars. Only 25% of our dollars are public dollars, and so we're seeking in a second piece of legislation to have a partition of funds more along the lines of the state-related. So we're regulated appropriately for our use of state dollars, but able to spend private dollars without the burden of state regulation.
And the one-time appropriation spread out over 5 years, just maybe, and I know time's running short, although I'm pretty sure some of my colleagues are going to follow up with some questions on this specifically. Yeah. A couple examples of how that money will foresee it being spent.
Yeah, sure. So the critical things on the table at the moment are a suite of shared services that enable us to drive down our operating costs by stop doing things 14 times over. We reckon there's probably between 90 and $120 million in cost savings to be taken off the table over the next 5 years. I can break that down for you. That would be 260 to 280 million cumulative. And then also to put in place the infrastructure that would enable our students to have a greater degree of fluidity across our universities, so that if you're a student at Clarion and you need to take a specialty in your nursing program that isn't available at Clarion, but is available elsewhere in the system, that you can have access to that program. Those would be two examples. And those are the things we would actually seek to do this year with the funding that we've requested with the $20 million.
Thank you. Thank you for your work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.